Hello everyone, I am Vishnu Poonai, and this is our continuing tutorial videos on MetaTrader exports. And today we will be doing a code review. The product owner and mentor is Dr. Masood Sahaji. So today we'll be looking at the code for the self-optimizing RSI or MFI expert trader. So what this trader does, firstly, is it is a self-optimizing trader, and it helps to first optimize itself to predict future trends for buying and selling. So it focuses on the overbought and oversold levels in the trades to go ahead and make either profitable or break even trades. And it does this by focusing on, like I said, the overbought and oversold levels in specific periods. So first off, let's look at some of the input values that are important to this trader. First here we have the magic number, which is the unique number for this EA, and secondly the optimizing periods. So the optimization periods or bars are a representation of price movements that contain the open, high, or low closing prices for a set period. One bar represents the set of quotes for a day. Just back to a comment. And this input it's set at is 144 bars or optimization periods. So we look at the aggressive feature of the input. It's set to false along with trade reverse. But what it is an important feature of this EA is that it does one order at a time. Let's move on to the next set of inputs. These deal with the lots inputs. Now lots are the number of currency units it will buy or sell. And one important input here is the percentage of risk, which is the balance to risk percentage. And this sets the amounts of risk at 2% of the total trade per trade. This expert advisor also uses dynamic lot sizing depending on indicator trends. Now let's move on to the next set of values here. Okay, so the next set of input values are the indicator values. So what it is basically is that, as you can see here, the Forex index indicator is what attempts to gauge the strength between price movements. And it does this by looking at a combination of three key pieces of market data. These are the direction of the price change, magnitude of the price trade, trading volume. And as you can see, the input here, it uses the RSI indicator, and it sets the indicator top value as 100 and bottom value as a 0. These are the top value that you would trade at and the bottommost value that you would trade at in a given trend. And then it sets here the time frames for the index and the Indy periods, which is the averaging period for the index, and ATR calculations, also known as the average true range, which is an indicator that shows the volatility of the market. And so basically what that's saying is, depending on the period you're optimizing or trading on, it uses the end frame, and the beginning frame is to calculate the average applied price. Let's go on to the next set of inputs here. And what these inputs are is it sets the stop loss and take profit variables, which are the most important ones here. It sets the stop loss first, which is the allowed limits to a loss on a particular trade, and the take profit variable, which is the exact price at which to close out an open position for a profit. It also sets the multiple stop loss variable, which is the number of stop losses before ending trade on a particular period. Okay, now let's move on to our next set of inputs here. These inputs set up the trigger to enable the break-even variable, or the break-even function. So what this does is that it sets the padding on trigger. So what that means is that based on the particular trading period, it sets up a limit as to what level of trade is acceptable per order before enabling or triggering the break-even settings. And in this case, the break-even settings is set to kick in if a certain amount of losses are occurring. It will shift its priority to break even rather than push further risk trades or orders. And this next set here is a global variables that will be used as we go into the functions, like the sell profits, buy profits. As we see here, the sell profits is the monetary amount for the best sell value for like the back testing, and buy profits is back tested profits for best buy value. Now, the next important piece of code here is the structure, that it collects bars or indicators relevant to the trader and ranks them based on potential loss and profit along with the monetary value, as we can see here. Now let us move on to the functions of this trader. This first off is the initialization function, and what this does is that it unload into the expert trader, the MetaTrader, it initializes the trader and loads all relevant values into memory. This warning alerts you that if the safety padding is higher than the trigger, then it will enable the break-even settings. Now, before we go on to the major on-tick function, we need to look at the supporting functions first. So firstly, let's look at the fill array function. And what this function does is it sets up an array with the optimized periods based on the indicator type and period time frame for use. So it grabs the specific period and time frames based on the indicators for that section that will now be tested based on the oversold and overbought calculations. So it grabs this at the beginning. So now let's look at our next important function, which is the overbought value generation. Now this is an important function to the expert advisor. So basically, first off, overbought is trading above its intrinsic value. So overbought, as we can see here, is generally described as the recent or short-term movement in price of the security and reflects expectation that the market will correct in price in the future. And so basically what this function does is it analyzes the indicator index to determine if the security is in an overbought position, determine its value, and if determining its value, it shall initialize a trade based on this value. Granted, other permitting values such as remaining money is available, or there isn't a stop loss available, etc. And this, so it creates a structure at first, as we can see here, to hold overbought levels. It set the initial values and ranks per overbought sections, and it then looks to see if there's an open order, and it checks to see if there's a stop loss or take profit first. It needs to check these variables before making trades. And then what this loop here is, it basically goes through the values and checks to make sure that more than once that the optimal price has been determined based on the overbought position, and then sends that value to a trade that will then be sent up to the main or the onTick function, and it executes an order. Now, this moves on to the oversold value generation. This is the similar to the overbought function. However, it looks at the oversold function, which refers to a condition where an asset is traded lower in price and has the potential for a potential price bounce. And this function follows those criteria similar to overbought. And if it's in a the security is in an oversold position, it determines its value. Like I said, this trader goes through it more than once, hence the loop it has for the optimization period, and it checks the value and the index value. So it goes through it more than once to determine the highest possible sell value, or as in the overbought function, the overbought value, and then sends that into a open trade that the EA will execute to make the best possible profit, or if it's in the break even criteria, execute that. Now let's move on to and as we can see here, it checks for the best value. This is the section of code here that's in both the overbought and oversold function that compares its values every time it rechecks the position to make sure that the value it is putting forward for the trade is the most optimal or the best. Now let's look at one of the next functions, which is a criteria function before the trade can be executed. And this function is called the check volume value. And what it is that the volume is a measure of how much given a financial asset has been traded in a period of given time, or how many times an asset has been bought or sold, as we can see here, explained here. So this function, therefore, is executed after the oversold or overbought is determined a particular trade is necessary, and it checks to ensure that the volume value is the correct or best value. And as you can see here, it goes through the minimum allowed value for trade operations, a maximum allowed value, and it gets the step of the volume trading, and it then determines if the correct volume value is there, and this passes on to a yes if it needs, which allows trades. If it's a no, it brings a halt to the trades. And which moves on to a next criteria checking function, which is the check money for trade. So what this function basically does is that checks the remaining money in the account before making a trade, and that's the total uninvested money remaining in a margin account after the margin requirement. This ensures it has enough for the potential trades, either in the overbought or overbought position. So it basically here it checks the free margin variable if there's a lot based on the lot sizes and the type of trade being asked, and if there is, it passes that criteria and the main function will carry forth the trade. If not, we'll get this error that there is no enough money for that particular trade. Now moving on. The next function we have to look at is the break-even function, and basically what is this function ensures that trades are shifted into the break-even territory depending on current stop-loss levels and open price orders versus the potential loss or profit to enable a break even before losses gain out of control. And what it basically does is it checks the padding versus the trigger, and if the padding is greater than the input trigger, then it triggers the break even, and upon trading, the expert advisor will make sure that there is potential to break even on trades more so than a runaway loss scenario or being aggressive towards trading for large levels of profits. And as you go run through the code, it checks stop levels and compares it to open price and the trigger. And this is an example here. If the stop loss is the new stop loss that it will incur on this trade, it's going to lead to a bigger number than the current stop loss, then it will sell the order and shift it to a break even in the case of selling, and vice versa for in the case of buying. Now let us look at the main function, the onTick function, which basically what this does is it pulls all those functions together, the check value, overbought, oversold, as it is running on a particular period or time frame. First, as we can see, it fills the array with the optimization values here that we spoke about earlier. And then it sets, based on the input, the stop loss value, the take profit value, and one of the most important input, if it's set to dynamic, it will update the stop loss and take profit depending on the time frame or periods that the EFRT-Trader is moving through. Now, second of all, this part here determines the lot size determination. And what this does is that it sets the lot size based on a percentage of the stop loss. Now, moving on. Reverse. Now, this section here establishes our basic buy-sell determination. So if based on the what is occurring in the overbought oversold, if the sell profits for this particular trade is greater than buy profits, then it initializes a sell at this period, which opens up a ticket or the send, and it will execute the sell order, and vice versa for the sell profits is greater than the buy profits, it will execute a buy at that particular trend or position. And it does this using the overbuy or oversold functions as we overbought, or oversold functions that we saw earlier. And so basically these functions pretty straightforward and simple to follow. The original author had very robust amount of commenting, and I have added general descriptions for each functions, and as this video just goes through the various functions. So yep, that's that for our review of this code. And here is the contact information. If you have any questions on this tutorial, please feel free to contact me at this indicated email address. If you have any inquiries for this project, please contact Dr. Masood Sahaji at this email address. And once again as well, the product owner is Dr. Masood Sahaji. Thank you.